Evening, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great weekend. But today we are going to be looking at the nodal change. That's another biggie for the month. It's going to be happening at the end of the month, 27th of July. The nodes are officially shifting into the sign of Aquarius and Leo. So we are going to be having the south node in the sign of Leo, and we are going to be having the north node in the sign of Aquarius. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter video because obviously we are going to be talking about these nodes way more in the upcoming 1 month. Of course, that's an exciting change, I think, for many of us. So let's get into it. This is the Leo Aquarius polarity, and whenever the nodes are changing signs, that's more of a major collective as well as a personal shift, actually. The lunar nodes move backwards through the zodiacal signs. So these transitions always feels like kind of like clearing of old habits to make room for a completely new social as well as kind of like a personal experience. With the south node moving into Leo and the north node moving into Aquarius, it's like an energetic mandate that is shifting away from this hyper individualistic spotlight and moving towards more of a collective innovation, the community building element, the forward thinking collaborations. So, because we are going to be having the South Node in the sign of Leo, and South Node always often represents our kind of comfort zone. It shows what we have outgrown potentially or what we are meant to be releasing. It doesn't mean we are going to be releasing those, but we are meant to be doing that. So because Leo is about ego, demanding validation, kind of top-down leadership, over dramatizing personal narratives and kind of needing to be in the center of attention. We are meant to be walking away from that. And North Node in the sign of Aquarius, North Node represents where we grow, where our future lies. So that is about group collaborations, objective way of thinking, humanitarian efforts, decentralized systems, prioritizing the collective good over kind of like the personal applause. So these are some of the main topics here. So, from a personal point of view, imagine that this is happening in your fourth and 10th house, for example. By the way, I'm not going to be breaking this down for all 12 signs today. But the old way would be the South Node in the sign of Leo, right? So maybe it's all about trying to be making all the decisions alone rather than getting others involved, or I'm trying to kind of hoard the credits and expect constant praise from the team. The shift into that Aquarius element is that it's like a flat management structure, right? So leadership becomes more about facilitation rather than domination. Success is measured by how well the team collaborates or innovates together, how people are able to kind of come together rather than just focusing on the individual needs and wants. Or the old way might have been that we were doing the clicking, right? So we were building an inner circle entirely around dynamic personalities, personal drama, social status. So I'm only going to be hanging out with the rich. I'm only going to be hanging out with politicians and all those type of things. And Northern in Aquarius is going to try to teach us to find our network where people are able to connect according to their kind of like brain wavelength as well, connecting with people based on shared vision, intellectual alignment, humanitarian goals. It's less about who is popular and it's more about who is working towards the same future. But also, maybe social media will be changing quite significantly because maybe we have wanted to prepare videos for personal validation and applause and kind of like the look at me fame, right? And the Northern in Aquarius says that we have to be using our creative voice to serve a larger cause. So the content creation, that project becomes more of a tool to connect, to educate, and to liberate community, shifting the focus from that creator to kind of like the impact that we can do, for example, with our channels. Remember that it's not about leaving the Leo element completely behind. I hate that approach. This is not about using your uniqueness. Instead, you take that creative fire of that Leo and you funnel it into that Aquarius network so that actually we can change things. It's kind of like realization when people get together, we are stronger together. You know, if there is a leader of a pact, which is Leo, for example, a lion, right? If there is a 10 hyena walking up to them, the lion might not stand a chance. So therefore, we need those teammates who are going to be popping in to that circle and then helping me out when it's needed. So that's why this friendship is going to be a big topic, it looks like, in the next 18 months. Now, remember that nodes are running in cycles. So every 18, 19 years, they are always in the same node, the same sign. So looking back 18, 19 years ago, kind of takes us back to 2007 to 2009, December 2007 to August 2009 to be precise. And that's when the global collective experience this exact North Node in Aquarius and South Node in Leo configuration. We talk about the past, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly the same, but it can give us certain type of clues what to pay attention to. So I would like you to reflect on the past as well, because this might be potentially something that you have to be considering. But, you know, I looked at what went down 2007 to 2009. And of course, we know what went down. That was a major financial crisis situation, right? So we had the South Node in the sign of Leo. And that was that the financial ego, you know, the Wall Street executives, the massive unchecked kind of personal bonuses that were just handed out, and the top down kind of like the masters of the universe mentality started kind of like going away a little bit. You know, it was an environment driven entirely by greed, basically. And I find it very interesting that the planet of greed, Jupiter, is going to be in the sign of Leo as well, making that conjunction to South Node, which is only going to be happening next year on 26 degree. But clearly it feels like that greed that currently going down in governments or among politicians, leaders, and so forth are going to be exposed. Now, you can think of the North Node as a correction. So North Node in Aquarius correction, you know, back in 2008-ish, when the bubble burst, that collective realization was brutal. And we had to be realizing that we are kind of like completely interdependent. And one reckless institution could take down the entire global network. That was the realization there, right? And it forced massive bailouts, collective regulatory restructuring, kind of like a hard shift towards economic survival based on community and systematic stability, rather than kind of like that individual wealth hoarding. Now, Aquarius rules networks, but also technology and anything that is decentralized, really. So if we think back, 2008 was the time when basically Bitcoin was born. So because there was a banking collapse, the direct response to it was the Bitcoin, right? And that got published somewhere in late 2008. I think that's an ultimate North Node in Aquarius event, creating that entire financial framework explicitly designed to eliminate the kind of like the centralized king, which is the Leo, and hand control over to the peer-to-peer kind of like decentralized like ledger systems. But also the very first iPhone got launched in 2007 as well. And over the next 2 years, social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter shifted from kind of niche novelties to more of a global network. So, of course, therefore, what do we learn from these couple of things that went down so far? Technological advancements are going to be happening, or maybe something, regulations around Bitcoin are going to be changing, and so forth. But also, 2008, if we think back in US, um, there was the campaign and election of Barack Obama, which was very fueled by a lot of Aquarius themes, in my opinion. Um, he wasn't relying on the traditional kind of top-down party machinery. His campaign made history by utilizing horizontal, kind of like decentralized digital organizing, the crowdfunding that he did, if you think back. Anyway, obviously, a lot of things that went down. So every time the nodes hit this axis, the universe aggressively checks any area of life where an individual, an institution, or an ego has become kind of like a bottleneck to the collective progress. And somehow that person is going to be removed, or that behavior is going to be removed. One of the things that I remember from a personal point of view was that this was pretty much the active years for me when I started really working with astrology, or I started working with the drawing tests. So talking about the drawing tests, I'm going to be starting that course on 5th of February, and I highly recommend to anyone who would like to get themselves better, or their loved ones, or children, or you want to work with it because it's a super good technique. And recently, my friend, who never believed in astrology and any type of these type of things, she made the drawings for me. So I'm just going to show you. I don't know if you can see it properly. Here you go. And we were able to identify from that snake, for example, if you look at it, that her desires are not being met, her sexual desires are not being met. And it also showed that she has got certain type of female problems, for example, cycle issues and so forth within her body. At that time, she didn't know that she had any type of problems at all. And then what happened was that she went to the doctor, and they found a lot of cysts in her, and then she had to be operated and so forth. So this was really shown from the drawings. So this drawing was designed, by the way, for medical purposes, especially by Russian psychologists and doctors, but it is very good for personal traits as well. So if you are interested, check it out on my website, AstroViktor.com. But I even can show you my website as well, kind of like very quickly. Well, am I able to show this? Well, I'm struggling to show. Hold on. What is going on here? Okay, well, for some reason I can't do it. But anyway, you go on my website and then you will be able to see that. So let's just move back to this, for this nodal change, because it feels like it's super important. So, I had to be looking at what is happening in the charts as well. And I should be able to change. Sorry about that. Yeah, I am able to show now. Here you go. So you guys should be able to see the chart, right? Yes, so you are seeing it. So I'm just gonna animate the chart. So why was I not able to show the... So you see that the nodes are changing sign on 29° of Aquarius and then 29°. Okay, so I'm just going to check back if you guys can see the chart, and for some reason you cannot see the chart. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then we're going to try again. I love it when I'm a technological genius, right? So one more time. Windows, here you go. Now you will be able to see this chart. Yes. So what do we see here is that on the day when there is a sign change happening between when the nodes are changing sign, you will be able to see that we do have got the Sun and Jupiter conjunction happening there. Right. So, and also what's very interesting is that the following day, or a couple of days later, we are going to be experiencing a full moon. And Moon and Pluto are going to be making a conjunction. But what's very important here is that that we are going to be experiencing a conjunction there between the Sun and Jupiter. So I would call that as the fuel there, right? So with the Sun sitting directly on Jupiter in the sign of Leo, I think there is a lot of creative fire there. There is a lot of confidence. There is a lot of desire for visibility. This is someone who is like a bit of a monkey energy, right? Look what I can do. And it can be super generous, but it also can be very dramatic as well. And it surely wants to expand outwards. But of course, the South Node is there in the sign of Leo as well. So there is a bit of a catch there, right? Because it is happening at the gateway of that South Node. So any attempt to use this kind of massive Jupiterian energy for pure ego kind of stroking, it's like the chasing the empty applause or demanding this huge control, it will backfire. That's what it kind of like tells us. Now, North Node is ruled by Aquarius. It's in the sign of Aquarius, right? So it is either ruled by Uranus or Saturn. I tend to be using the traditional rulers, by the way. But as the traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn, and Saturn is retrograde in the sign of Aries. So Saturn is the builder to the future. And it's in a very pioneering sign, right? It is in Aries, and it surely demands something authentic, self-directed, certain type of actions. But it's retrograde, so there is a pressure that is turned a little bit inward. There's a lot of internal restructuring of how we handle our personal power, how we handle our boundaries going on. But what's very important here is that Jupiter and Saturn next month are going to be making a trine, and it's going to be a fire trine, right? Firstly, Sun is going to make a trine to Saturn, and then Jupiter later on is going to make a trine to Saturn as well. And therefore, I truly believe that these nodal changes could be actually super good. Because without that trine, it's like you are launching something, like you're going to be creating something like flashy with Jupiter, Sun in the sign of Leo. And because I want to be treated like a star. But it obviously, the South Node kind of says that it's not going to work out because South Node is usually a negative type of energy. But then the trine to Saturn is kind of like giving us that structural substance, that true community connection, causing it to kind of deflate under that South Node. That Sun-Jupiter conjunction gives you a creative vision and potentially the confidence as well that we need to take up space. And trying to Saturn retrograde in Aries forces you to sit down and kind of do the gritty, kind of behind the scene work of, let's say, structuring your business kind of independently. It's about using your creative voice, not to get praise, but to build a functional system that can scale, that can improve somehow your life. But remember, we need to be able to part of a group as well. And that's what North Node in the sign of Aquarius represents, because that's about group collaboration. It doesn't mean I'm going to be handing over my personal power to others, but it's about I scratch your back and then you are going to be scratching my back as well. And somehow we are going to be equal partners in that. So, it's without the trine, it's like you're trying to lead a group by being the loudest, the most dominant voice in the room. And that is going to be triggering kind of like this collective pushback of that Aquarius North Node. So if your friends are going to be like, don't scream at me, I'm not your friend or stuff like that. Okay, so but we have got that Saturn and Jupiter trine, which I'm obviously going to be making a separate video about. But with the Sun and Jupiter conjunction, we have got that a warm presence. And Saturn retrograde in the sign of Aries grounds you. So instead of dominating, it's about using that personal authority to create this firm, well-bounded space where everyone else can step up, everyone can have an opinion, for example. Now, even though this fire trine looks beautiful, a trine is just an opportunity. It is telling you that if you do this way, then it's going to be successful. If you are doing the opposite way, and then you are kind of like getting stuck in your comfort zone because the ego gets in the way, and that's Sun and Jupiter in the sign of Leo, accompanied by the South Node in the sign of Leo as well. So therefore, we are signing up for failure, basically. Okay. So, but before we go a little bit further, I also want to talk to you about the transition from Virgo South Node to a Leo South Node, right? Because like I mentioned in previous videos, we have to be able to learn something from the past, because remember that the nodes are moving backwards. So that was my initial statement, right? So that's about clearing the path of the past so that we can create a better future. So to understand that change, we have to be looking at what we are leaving behind. So for the last 18 months, Virgo South Node had us kind of caught in a loop of hyper analysis, micromanagement, worrying over details, kind of like trying to fix everything. And the escape hatch was the Pisces North Node, which asked for surrender, forgiveness, trust, or looking at the bigger, kind of like the spiritual picture. Now, so we have got this shift, right? The outgoing loop is the Virgo South Node. So if we got stuck in these endless loops of sorting, perfecting, criticizing, overanalyzing data, trying to stay safe through the competence and kind of like checking boxes, the ticking boxes, then of course the new challenge, which is Leo South Node, that you are going to be looking for those external applauses that, oh, I fixed this one, I fixed that one. And guess what's going to happen? No one is going to give you that applause, because everyone is going to forget about, like, with Virgo, it's very easy to make mistakes, and you have done 100 good things, but the last thing that people are going to remember with a Leo South Node is the last mistake you ever created. So I hope that makes sense. And then how Leo of South Node is going to be reacting to it. It's going to be being overly dramatic. Oh, I'm just going to leave the job behind. Or, I'm going to be demanding validation because I am insecure. Of course, I'm insecure because I was over criticizing myself, for example, with the Virgo South Node. So remember, we have got the antidote, which was the Pisces North Node. And that was about trusting our intuition and looking at the bigger picture and kind of like looking at the trends as well. Now, the antidote is going to be the Aquarius North Node, which is I'm going to be collaborating objectively. I'm going to be able to share power with the group, because the sharing the energy is very fixed sign related. So if we are unable to share the spotlight, for example, because there could be a downfall of Sun and Jupiter conjunction and the South Node in the sign of Leo, that I don't want to be sharing the spotlight. It feels like that spotlight is going to be taken away from you. So from a work point of view, I mean, imagine that with the South Node in the sign of Virgo, maybe a project stalled, right? Because we wanted it to be making it perfect, or we wanted to micromanage it. And you were looking at spreadsheets and you were tweaking minor details and you try to fix every tiny error yourself. often out of the sheer anxiety. Otherwise, it wouldn't be perfect, right? I'm unable to ask for help. And then under the Leo South Node, if that project stalled, then it's going to be about pride. So I need to fix these technical flaws because I need to prove that I'm a great leader. I'm a great authority figure. So you want to start kind of holding the control, overriding other people's opinion, worry about how, I don't know, the slowdown reflects on your reputation, right? So this is just one way of thinking about that. But we can look at a relationship example as well. So with the Virgo South Node, imagine that you were just kind of looking at, because let's say you have got it in the seventh house, right? You were just looking for the perfect partner, and the opportunity kind of came around, but you always found flaws in them, right? So how is that going to be affecting your Leo South Node? Maybe someone else is going to start kind of like telling you your own flaws. Maybe you are going to be able to meet someone so-called perfect, but then they're going to tell you, oh, I'm sorry, but your boobs are hanging a little bit, or your nipples are not at the right place. I'm talking about, because I hate my nipples, they are not in the right place. So one day I would like to do a plastic surgery, but that's a little bit in the future. So, and I'm very conscious about it, and I don't like taking off my t-shirt because of that, because weight loss and stuff like that. So that's the ego there, right? The Leo South Node ego. And we just have to be, be aware of this transitional energy as well. Often with Virgo South Node, we were hiding behind tasks and data, but we are entering a phase where we are forced to stand visible in a way. But the catch is that we can't stand there just to feed our own ego. The clean, efficient work habits built during that Virgo transit now serve as kind of like the back end structure for the public creative platforms potentially that we want to be managing next. Or you can even put this information into your relationship department also. The Leo South Node is like, I am who I am. And you take it or you leave it type of energy, right? So it is a fixed sign, so it could become very rigid. This is who I am, take it or leave it. The world needs to bend around my personality. That could be the Leo South Node kind of motto. So under this transit, it's like the collective simply will not tolerate that kind of egotistical behavior anymore. And it's more of an exposing where healthy self-expression has soured into entitlement or the demand for special treatments. I started seeing this, by the way, in politics, because there's a lot of posts happening about why did this politician spend, I don't know, $107,000 visiting US, spending their 3 days with accommodation, and why did the son go with this politician? The son has nothing to do with politics, but they visited the, I don't know, the the zoo or something like that, and then the private cars and so forth. So they spend $107,000 in 3 days, and that's out of our pocket. That's the type of scenarios that I can really kind of like imagine here. And the South Node in the sign of Leo kind of tells you that there's a king without a kingdom. So acting like an authority figure without actually contributing anything of value to the group is going to be somehow knocked off the throne, okay? Or this is the validation addiction, right? So basing every action, every decision, every interaction on how much attention, applause, or praise I will gain out of that. It's like, I would call the South Node in the sign of Leo is the main character syndrome. So I'm viewing other people merely as kind of like an audience, or kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? The pawns, right, on the chess board, and I'm the king here. So the North Node in Aquarius is the correction of this behavior, and the North Node in Aquarius says, "Great, you know who you are now. What are you actually doing with that identity to help us, to help the world?" How does the unique talent serve the network? How does the unique talent serve the bigger picture? So that's going to be a huge topic there. So what I'm kind of like really thinking, because, oh, I also looked at something for you. The last time when we had the South Node as well as Jupiter in Leo was a very brief time, but it was 1990. It happened between August to November 1990. And previously it was in 1886 on top of my head. So this doesn't happen that often, okay? So I had to go back, of course, to look at what went down in 1990. And in August 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And that was kind of like a textbook display of this centralized dictator trying to expand his territory and hoard wealth and resources. So Jupiter expanding the South Node in Leo, that shadow side of Leo as well. And what was the Aquarian response to it? The world didn't just sit back. So it triggered Operation Desert Shields, and which was a unprecedented international coalition of dozens of nations uniting as kind of like a collective network to neutralize this aggressor. And it really feels like this is exactly what we are going to be seeing in 2026, 27, 28. Okay. During this same window, it was the reunification of Germany as well, October 1990. And that was kind of like the dismantling of the Soviet Union. So let's see what's going to happen with the Russia and the Ukraine war, for example, because I've got a feeling that they are going to be surely in the topics, or something to do with the Middle East, of course. So I'm feeling like it's a fall of a titan kind of monopolies or influencers, really. Jupiter inflates whatever it touches, but when it touches the South Node, it inflates it to the point of bursting. Okay, so I think it's a high profile downfalls of a huge celebrity, a CEO, a political figure, who have operated with total hubris, actually. And it's like the collective starts losing its appetite for worshipping a billionaire or a trillionaire, maybe, right? Companies or platforms built entirely around a singular kind of personality or centralized monopoly, I think they might be facing some very legal type of public backlashes. It's scandal. It's something to do with drama, basically. I think also we are potentially going to be seeing a distinct rise in aggressive and bold kind of like posturing from world leaders, kind of trying to play the strongman role. And the Aquarius North Node says that, oh, I'm going to make it fail. Unless you are backed by a very, let's say, practical alliances. So I think the power will not be belonging to the loudest country, for example, but to the tightest, kind of most technologically integrated network of nations who are kind of like uniting and collaborating with others. So I can imagine that there's going to be a world power shift happening as well. Or at least a lot of kind of like, I don't want to use the word fight because I'm not necessarily saying this is something to do with a war, okay? But it's more to do with fight for resources so that I can have the power, if that makes sense. But because Leo rules entertainment, theater, show business, Jupiter wants to blow that up. The South Node drains that old format. So I think the traditional Hollywood kind of model or the way things are broadcasted, it might be hitting a wall, and we might see some major financial struggles for in the entertainment industry. or at least the distribution of that. And maybe less and less people are going to go to theater or something like that. But with the North Node in Aquarius and with Saturn in the sign of Aries, I think we are going to be seeing very superficial kind of AI gimmicks or some type of flashy digital trends. I think funding might dry up for tech companies that are kind of like just putting up a show there, and instead technology that solves certain type of infrastructure issues or energy grids or security problems. I think those might get standardized, or those might get to be in the middle of the attention, basically. So it feels like Jupiter is going to give that type of a one last kind of massive burst of performative energy to that old ego. And although it will look big, loud, and kind of untouchable at first, but it feels like it's going to be somehow bursting. I cannot wonder if Trump, for example, will try to get Greenland. And, at the NATO summit in Ankara, which I made some predictions about before, Trump really renewed his aggressive push for the United States to take control of Greenland from Denmark. And obviously, this kind of combination would say that it's going to fail. And we know that Trump has got a Leo rising sign. And it's interestingly enough, the Leo South Node conjunction is going to be happening right on his Mars, which is in the sign of Leo as well. So, but the bottom line is that Trump's approach to Greenland has been entirely the top-down, kind of approach. I'm the star, I'm the most important person ever. And he has used a lot of high-stakes leverages, threatening 25% tariffs on European nations and even hinting at questioning NATO's framework if the US doesn't get its way. So he has made a lot of threatening. And maybe he's going to be making even more, and maybe he's going to be told, okay, see you later, go. And then I'm going to be making new alliances, if that makes sense. So this is kind of like maybe an unrealistic scenario that I'm giving you, but these are the type of scenarios that I can really imagine. Because the Northern in Aquarius doesn't tolerate the egotistical, that imperial behavior, right? So it says power must be distributed. Remember, we have got a Pluto-Jupiter opposition going on as well, though, right? Which is a fight for power. So that's why I'm thinking the European allies or NATO leadership are going to be somehow unifying even further to kind of knock Trump out of the picture. Or the other way around, US is going to be connecting with other countries to kind of knock down NATO and so forth. Like I said, I don't think it's a war, okay? It's more of a ideological type of stuff here. So that's a couple of predictions. I did look at, like I said, the last time it was happening, it was 1990, but previously it was in 1896, actually. 1896 to 1897, when Jupiter was also in the sign of Leo alongside with the South Node. And so I had to be looking at what was going down there as well. Again, it was a presidential election. That was one of the most dramatic in history, of course. But that was the Gilded Age of, it was at its absolute peak. And a tiny circle of these tycoons and central bankers and corporate monopolies held this total power basically over the economy. And they really insisted on this gold, like gold being the literal, gold is the metal of Leo, right? So they were insisting on this gold standard, and of course it enriched the few while the working class was kind of like starving. So how did the Aquarius North Node respond to that? Well, it came up with a populist movement. So anyway, they called it, I think, the cross of gold. It was a speech, or it was declaring that humanity would not be crucified on a cross of gold just to serve the elite, basically. So that's a textbook of, and the Aquarian kind of like rebellion behavior against this top-down Leo kind of consolidation. Yeah, the gold rush started around that time as well. And like we said, some really got rich. And I do believe that some will get rich right now as well because of that Jupiter and Pluto opposition. I spoke about that beforehand, but that's a being rich versus being super poor at the same time. What really happened there is that the tens of thousands of people abandoned their lives to change that fortune. But the South Node reality quickly set in, actually, because the environment was brutal. The vast majority found nothing, and the survival ultimately depended on the communities and the supply networks, right, which is Aquarius. And there was the Battle of Adwa as well. And also, it was the very first modern Olympic Games in 1986, right? So we might be seeing that the Olympic Games are changing quite significantly. Okay, so that's it for now, really. Like I said, we are going to be exploring this further. So next week, I want to get a little bit more personal with this nodes, and I mean, South Node in the sign of Leo as well as in the sign of Aquarius. So we are going to be breaking this down for all 12 signs and so forth. But I'm wondering how you guys feel like. How is that going to be changing your perspective, and what went down with you like a good 18, 19 years ago? I would love to hear. um, but also, one other thing that I wanted to invite you is that if you want to study astrology with me, then basically you can go on my website. Again, I'm gonna try to share. Yeah, I can now. I don't know how it works, but Windows. I'm not too sure why it doesn't allow me to show my. This way I can, I guess. So maybe you are able to see my screen. Yeah. So here is my website. And then if you log in, then you're going to see a membership right here. And then it's going to show you that, for example, today I did Doriforia, which is your guardian angel planet, and how to determine which planet is your guardian angel. Next live reading I'm going to be doing is full moon in Aquarius for my members. Tomorrow we've got the ultimate predictive course. So you will be able to see that you can see this membership plans here, for example. So there is just a foundational one, which is you can look at the past webinars and any new and full moon readings, and only 5 webinars a month. Level 3 is around $1,000, but you get 223 courses and webinars all together, and Q&A chats, and 40% of personal readings, a lot of stuff. And a level 2 just is an archive, so all webinars you can watch. So you might want to be checking out, and if you are part of one of my members, then the drawing course is 50% off right now. It's a 24-week course. So, and then when you go back here, then what you really see is that you click on courses, for example, you get some quizzes, and then it tests your knowledge on certain type of courses and webinars. And then I don't know, maybe I'm going to click on Choriklo, for example, which I did recently. Okay, so my screen is frozen now. Okay, here you go. So charic law, and then you go on continue, and then you will be able to see everything. Like you can view the course there, and then you find the downloadable PDF files there. And then once you complete it, and it's completed, then it's going to suggest which one would be the next step for you to study if you want to become professional. There's a lot of goodies happening in the chart. So thank you very much. Do let me know how you see the South Node in the sign of Leo and North Node in the sign of Aquarius. How do we best reconcile South Node Leo while Jupiter is in Leo? So I've spoken about that. That's one way, but I'm going to get a little bit more personal about that, Jupiter and South Node, in my very next video. Have a lovely week, everyone. Any questions at all? Do we feel the kind of basket configuration? Obviously, it started on the 15th. And of course, today we have got the Uranus and Pluto trine happening right now, right? So that's actually very important as well, because surely this Uranus and Pluto trine really kind of talks to us about new technology, right? But also it can represent the fear of about future as well, but we can kind of have clarity about it, or anything that is taboo is all of a sudden kind of becomes no taboo anymore, because we've got these intellectual kind of like downloads happening, right? So enjoy the Uranus in Gemini trine Pluto retrograde right now. But surely this is just echoing the nodal changes as well, which shows massive changes are coming up in the next few years. How will it feel for Leo? So today we are not talking about the 12 signs. We are going to be talking about the 12 signs in one of the next videos next week. And that's going to be quite detailed. I might even do it in 2 parts, 6 signs first and then 6 signs others, because I just don't want to be doing a 2-minute stuff. I want to be really kind of like putting together. Oh, thank you very much for the mystery gift. These new jewels. I know it's a new feature on YouTube. Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone, and I will see you in my next video.